Asian women are portrayed as exotic, sensual, and hypersexualized beings in the media that are often the source of someone's fetish or fantasy. One of the first films to show in color was also the first film to stereotype Asian women as docile and subservient. Tolo the Sea stars Anna May Wong, who plays a Chinese woman that falls in love with this American man who randomly washes up on the seashore. They get married, have a kid, and she changes her style to fit in for when he whisks her away to the United States. However, he ends up leaving her. She's helpless without him and doesn't want to live. He returns only for her to find out that he's married a woman in the U.S. Wong ends up giving this random lady who she doesn't even know her son because she believes that they can give him a better life. And then she drowns herself because she served her sole purpose for the film. Asian women are subjected to play characters that lack agency and complexity because they're framed as exotic ornaments and sexual objects more than they're portrayed as actual human beings. The lotus flower or China doll trope reinforces stereotypes of Asian women as sexually subservient and meek. The lotus flower caters to the needs of white men.
At your service.
Good.
On the opposite end of the sexually available geisha girl lies the cold, calculated dragon lady. She's villainous. She's cunning. She uses her sexuality as a means to manipulate. She's so dangerous because she's a temptress because of this sexual allure that she has. The contemporary model minority that's achieved the American dream through hard work and passive obedience, combined with the gendered stereotypes of exoticness, hypersexuality, and mystique that surround Asian American women, limit our capacity to humanize them. And this also leads to the violence against them that we see perpetuated by the media. This is because they're either portrayed as objects for the taking or power-hungry temptresses.
Okay, so now we're going to get into where these stereotypes come from. So in 1875, the Page Act prohibited the entry of Chinese women. They effectively banned them because they prohibited anyone coming who was coming forward in a moral purpose, and this was targeted specifically at East Asian women. In 1882, the Chinese Exclusion Act prohibited the entry of all Chinese people. In the 1800s, a wave of Chinese laborers came over, and people were claiming that they were stealing all the jobs, so they banned them all. And both of these acts contribute to the idea that they're this dangerous and alien group in the United States. So during World War II, the Chinese Imperial Army kidnapped and coerced young teenage girls into becoming sex slaves for them. So they became comfort women who provided entertainment for American soldiers. And this is where the idea that they're this over-sexualized, fetishized group comes from. So in 1965, the Hart-Celler Act opened immigration quotas, opening the U.S. up for highly skilled immigrants from East Asia. So there were a lot of educational sponsorships, so they were coming over to the grad programs and getting these high-paying jobs in science and technology fields, and this contributed to the idea that they were this model minority because they were one of the top-earning races. And the term model minority was coined by sociologist William Peterson in 1966 in the New York Times. So in the 70s and 80s, more immigration policy changes allowed for more Asians into the U.S. who were blue-collar workers. So these are your mom-and-pop shops, your spas, your massage parlors, your entertainment. And there were a lot of refugees, and there was a lot less educational sponsorship. So this is where the idea of the perpetual foreigner comes from.
Those who continue to perpetuate racism and sexism in society are the ones who benefit most from its effects. In general, white populations, especially white males, stand to gain the most from racism and sexism because they receive the large benefit of privilege. This all stems from the media surrounding non-white and female populations. When images and representations are shown consistently and constantly in the media that we consume every day in a way that is shown as normal and acceptable, these ideologies slowly become ingrained in our mindset, ingrained in our everyday lives, ingrained in the way we raise our children. So when we talk about who benefits from racism and sexism, it's always those who are doing the racist and sexist actions, with or without their knowledge. It would be in the privileged population's best interest to continue perpetuating these racist, sexist portrayals of other cultures in media, as it helps keep these ideals accepted as the norm in our society. When we talk about stereotyping Asian women specifically, non-Asian populations are benefiting from their downfall the most, as they can continue to remain dominant and receive privilege over Asian populations. Specifically, with the over-sexualization of Asian women in the media, men stand to gain the most from this sort of depiction. Having representations of Asian women in the media as the foreign temptress, only visible for sexual encounters, means that men always get to be the powerful, dominant hero figure who can have a complex storyline and can use Asian women like an object at their disposal. Men, and especially white males, as is seen in most instances in the media, receive benefits sexually, socially, economically, and systematically based off of the stereotypes of Asian women in our media.
Okay, by understanding the intersection of identity for Asian American women and the stereotypes against them, we can now begin to look at the impacts of these stereotypes. The first being the increase in violence, which we've not only seen for the Asian American community as a whole, but specifically for Asian American women, with this statistic showing that Asian women report 2.3 times more hate incidents than men. And the shooting in Atlanta is really a prime example of violence against Asian American women. The shooter here claimed that this was not a race-based incident, rather it was due to his sexual desires. But what's really important here is that the sexualization of Asian American women and racism are intertwined, as we have examined with these stereotypes already. So here he used these sorts of sexual stereotypes as justification not only for his actions, but for the fact that they were not racist, which leads both to the violence against Asian American women as well as the erasure of their identity, which we will examine in this third point, being that it causes them to be invisible in the media. So this sort of justification just allows for their experiences to be downplayed and ignored. And as this quote sort of points out, when you claim things aren't race-based, you basically downplay the responsibility of those who are perpetrating this racism. And you're essentially minimizing the entire experiences and the identities of these Asian American women who were murdered in Atlanta. So by validating these stereotypes, you are just using them as justification for this violence, and it creates sort of this oppressive cycle of these stereotypes allowing for more violence to happen, and these experiences of these women continue to be oppressed.